Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.
Hello, welcome to the RTÉ GAA Podcast. Mikey, Stafford and Rory O'Neill here with you, and we are joined by UCD history professor and all-round expert on all things that happened yesterday and before that, Paul Rouse, who's also the presenter of the Irish Examiner's Football Podcast. How are you doing, Paul?
Very well, Mikey. How are you keeping? How are you, Rory?
Very good, Paul. How's it going, guys?
Good. I'm a bit sick and could have thought we'd skip this week's podcast, but look, we've had some pretty major news in the world of GAA. Roscommon have a manager, that being the main one. Obviously, Davy Burke appointed last night, so that's it. We now have a full house of football managers. No, we have Paul on because we want to talk about the new GAA broadcast rights deal, and we certainly felt we needed an outside voice to talk about that because myself and Rory and one of our pundits talking about it might be a little bit
of a jaundiced view,
a little bit inside baseball. But before we get to the heavy stuff, the All-Stars were named last night, named this morning. As is tradition, the All-Ireland finalists dominating everything that happened before that date are almost forgotten. We have a couple of Derry men in there, and we have a dub. But other than that,
Kerry and Galway.
Yeah, so there's 4 teams, which is pretty insular even by All-Star standards, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we did, like as I said, as a social experiment, really more than anything else. At the end of the league this year, I did the highlights of the league, and we just said we'd have a rattle off picking a team of the league, and it was more for curiosity's sake than anything else. And there was 11 different counties represented by the time we put the team down. Now that obviously included the likes of Sam, the chap from Louth. His name escapes me now. Sam Mulroy. Apologies, but fair play, Paul. But so there was a really good spread across the divisions and across the team itself in terms of representation. But it is the way of the All-Stars when you get to the end of the season. There's huge weighting on semi-finals and finals, and I suppose that's probably rightly so. That's the acid test. I do think it's unfortunate though for a few counties. Shane McGuigan maybe from Derry might feel a tad a little bit harshly done. I'm a massive fan of Lee Keegan. I think he just plays well every year. I probably would have tried to fit him in somewhere, and I think, as the lads mentioned, there's no Armagh representation on the team. I think they've had a really good year, so there's possibly a few guys maybe feeling hard done by there too. But look, all in all, I think it's a reasonably fair team, and it's a tough job no matter what way it pans out.
Yeah, it is, and Paul, it's one of the great traditions in Gaelic games is to pick apart the All-Star team and ask what bloody championship the guys on the panel were watching. So it's very rare. The discussion is very rarely around who is on the team, really, isn't it? The discussion, as soon as the team is named, it becomes who's not on the team.
So I'd like to flip that a little bit. I will say it's brilliant to see Christy McKay get an All-Star who's been an outstanding servant on and off the field to Derry football and to his own club in football and hurling. It's excellent to see that.
Yeah,
I agree with most of the selections on the team, but life would be fairly boring if we all agreed on everything, and there has to be room for dissent in everything. So my dissent will be based around. I agree on the point of Lee Keegan. I think he would just lose out in the year. I think he'd be my seventh defender, along with Thomas Sullivan. I think Thomas Sullivan from Kerry, although he had a very difficult All-Ireland final, did have a little bit of a struggle for a while in the Munster Championship against Cork in the round, had an excellent year and was particularly good in the quarterfinal this year. I think the big one, there are 2 talking points for me. I think Ethan Rafferty is very unlucky to lose out in the goals. I think he brought something totally different to the championship, something very exciting to the championship. I'm not saying that Shane Ryan doesn't deserve it, and I can see how that decision is made. The big one for me is Rian O'Neill. The idea that Rian O'Neill didn't fit into that forward line doesn't hold water for me. I can see the arguments that pick the 6 forwards there, but if it was my choice, I would have picked Rian O'Neill instead of Kieran Kilkenny. I think Kieran Kilkenny is one of the great players of this millennium. I think he's been absolutely outstanding. He's a tremendous fella. He brings an awful lot to that Dublin team. His record stands outstandingly so for the last decade and more. But I thought Rian O'Neill was better than him this year.
Yeah.
That's it, really, isn't it? It's as simple as that. Yeah. I would agree. Yeah.
I think the goalkeeper one is a very interesting one as well, because it's there's a generational thing there. There's a culture clash almost in kind of what a goalkeeper should be, and Shane Ryan is very traditional, I suppose, with the added kind of modern necessity of an excellent kick out. But obviously Rafferty was kind of upsetting the whole apple cart this year, and there'll be feelings in Armagh that he wasn't, he perhaps it was his forays up the field that cost him when, he made more saves, his restarts were probably better, etc., etc. So I think that's one that's the really interesting one for me in kind of the terms of what is the future of the goalkeeper, and how many teams will kind of look to mimic what Ethan Rafferty was. I suppose you probably need to win in All Ireland with an Ethan Rafferty type goalkeeper before too many are mimicking him.
And 4 All-Stars for David Clifford. I mean, I think, is he 20? Is he 23?
He's 23, I think.
Is he 23? Is he is this his fourth All-Star? And he'll obviously pick up Footballer of the Year as well. I mean, just extraordinary talent. Special player.
Yeah, special player. And I think the only one who I think is really pushes anyway close to him is Shawnee O'Shea. So the basic fact is the two of them are in the same dressing room. I'm talking about in this year. Obviously, a fit Conor Callaghan will enter the equation there as well very, 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 very quickly. And it was actually interesting. Conor Callaghan got a nomination for an All-Star this year, but he played very little football.
Yeah,
that was quite interesting. Anyway, David Clifford. David Clifford's fairly good, isn't he?
He's a pretty good player.
There's our headline. David Clifford, pretty good at football. So the All Stars are on RTÉ2 tomorrow night, and the hurling team will be announced live. There's going to be lots of GAA on RTÉ in the next few years. See what I did there? As the GAA confirmed their new rights deal, 5-year rights deal to run to 2027. And whether it was rushed out or whether it just came the day after kind of the most significant news, Paul, I suppose, did come the day before. I think Colin Keys had it out a little bit before anybody else with the Irish Independent, that Sky were exiting the market after their 8 or 9 years, which I think came as a surprise to most of us. I've spoken to some people since and said, oh yeah, I knew that was going to happen, but I think most people are quite surprised that they've gone completely. Maybe there was an expectation they might reduce their footprint, but for them to exit the market completely, I don't think was on anybody's radar, was it?
No, I didn't expect it. Anyway, I thought, having made the decision to go to Sky in the circumstances that had previously taken the amount of money that was at issue, I was surprised when that news came out. Against that, their Sky's viewership figures were very low, and the world has changed, fundamentally changed, in terms of how people are accessing sport, the changes in the market around the pandemic, the development of apps on phones and on tablets and onto smart televisions has redrawn what's possible. So I think it's the context of the decision is what matters, and it's really exciting, the idea that there is technological change which can be harnessed to promote and develop Gaelic games, and to bring games that are played everywhere, in the smallest field, in the smallest club in the country, if it's properly served by broadband, and you have a camera and you can stream. There is the opening up of the broadcast of matches at every level, and that's what we learned in the pandemic. And from, I think this was a revolution in the first instance, led in that first summer of the pandemic, when county boards began to show club matches when people couldn't access games, or when they could go, when the limitations were put on crowd size and it was impossible to get tickets. And then it followed through into the autumn and of that first year of the pandemic, 2020, when games were played behind closed doors and every game was broadcast, whether on television or on GAA Go. I think, first of all the league matches, and then all the championship matches. The fact that you could see them changed the world in terms of it pushed the boundaries, basically. I think the story of crisis is, what crisis in the world does is it accelerates change that's already happening. And I think that's the story of GAA Go.
Yeah, crisis-unity, as Homer Simpson said. Rory, on the exit of Sky,
I think it's pity.
To play devil's advocate here, because we do in RTÉ in Montrose, all of us listen to a lot of Sky revolutionized GAA. Yeah, they're doing.
That's a bit over. It was always a bit overstated.
It was, but competition is a good thing at the same time, isn't
it? Great. We embrace competition. I thought Sky coming into the market, like from a professional point of view, back in the day, I thought it was brilliant. I was like, bring it on, fantastic. Like, competition is exactly what we need. It should be something that we should embrace and take it on. I mean, Sky News came into the Irish market and RTÉ News beat them out the gate, sent them packing. I felt we could do the same thing in sport, and I didn't really see a huge amount from them over the course of the 9 years. That was in any way, wow. I mean, I always give people a very simple test. In the 9 years they were on the air, is there one standout moment in a studio context that sticks out in your mind straight away? No, there isn't. In the whole time that they were on the air. So, I mean, but what they did was absolutely fine. It was really good, solid broadcasting, like Sky always do. And I think from a professional point of view, I thought it was fantastic. In a moral sense, I was always a bit queasy about it, because it kind of had in my head, the likes of the Cusacks and the Davins, when they were signing these papers in Hayes' Hotel back in 1884, did they envisage a day when you were going to be sitting down around the table with Rupert Murdoch and signing off the rights to watch to the family jewels? That kind of moral sense, as a GAA person, I was a little bit less queasy with. But I think from a competitive point of view, from a professional sense and from RT sense, I thought it was manna from heaven. I thought it was a really, really positive development. Okay.
That's interesting, Paul, because Rory goes to the Rupert Murdoch element of Sky. He's no longer involved with B Sky B, as far as I understand. I lose track of the Murdoch empire, but I think that's where it's at the moment. Most people, Paul, their concern was going behind the paywall. The Michael Dignan argument, etc. The old folks' homes, the hospitals. Streaming is an even more kind of stark kind of a paywall, really, isn't it? Because doesn't come out by direct debit once a month and you can always forget about it and say, well, I watch the soccer as well, or I like the cricket. This is, you're paying €5, €7, whatever it is, to watch one game. It's a very, very transactional event. There's no getting around with it. There's no disguising it. This is pay for play. Exactly. Pay for what per watch.
Okay, I'd like to take a step back to the last question, though. I think so. I disagree profoundly with the GAA making a decision to give its games to Sky, but my criticism was not of Sky. My criticism was of the GAA, and the GAA doing not something that Michael Cusack or Maurice Davin said about the GAA, because of course there was no television or no radio in 1884. They couldn't have a position on it, but what was the case was that the people who ran the GAA 10 years ago did have a position on it, and they said that they would never do this, and that they advanced reasons for doing it which did not hold water, as in that it was for immigrants, and that unfortunately it was already the case that all immigrants who were living in Britain could already see the game through Premier Sports at a much cheaper price than Sky offered. Number one. Number two, I think the Sky coverage is very good. I think Damien Lawler, I know he's with RTÉ now, I thought he was excellent. I thought Grania McElwain was excellent. I think the pundits are really good. I think Peter Canavan, Jimmy McGuinness, and then in the hurling, I liked Ollie Canning, and Nicky English is enduringly good. But I would say that the idea that they changed or transformed broadcasting of Gaelic games just doesn't hold water, and I think it's an insult to people in TV3 who had those rights at the games beforehand, who did a thoroughly professional job on them as well. It's an insult to TG Cahir, whose coverage of Gaelic games going back more than 2 decades has been outstanding, and it's an insult to the professionalism people in RTÉ who do the game, and it doesn't hold water. I think that's not in any way to criticize the people who ran Sky, just to say that the idea that they transformed the broadcast of Gaelic games just
it was good. It was I agree, Paul. It was good, solid broadcasting. They didn't reinvent anything. They didn't come like a couple of, gimmicky type things. Let's have Anthony Nash standing behind the goal. How much value, really? Okay, fair enough, grand. But it was a few things, and you're saying, that's definitely something that we could look at. But it was good, solid broadcasting and nothing more, in my view.
Yeah, and then on top of that, so the next question then is you have to discuss the idea of whether the streaming technology is actually going to be more difficult and more expensive for people to use than the Sky Sports access was. And I come down and I say it's really simple. Depends on how it's used. So if GAA Go is going to charge a tenner a match for everybody to watch any individual match, then I disagree with it. However, if the GAA Go, which is owned by RTÉ and GAA and the GAA itself in a shared partnership, develops a season ticket and it's linked in some way to membership of the GAA, for example, and which are special deals done, then I can see the logic of it and I can see how it can work. And the provision, the idea that there will be access through this site ultimately to up to 200 games a year, I think there's the potential there to offer a really good service over time. I don't think it's fair to expect that this service immediately will be exactly what you will want it to be, or that will be run in a particular way. But I think if you're sensible and proportionate, and over the next 4 to 5 years, it's developed in a way that's appropriate to both the promotion of the games and the provision of a service to GA members and people who like Gaelic games, then I fully support it.
Yeah, it's going to be tricky for the GA, Rory. This is your area of expertise. The broadcasting, say, outside of the 70 minutes, before halftime and after. That's what you specialize in, and we've some very highly qualified people in RTÉ who've been doing it for hundreds of years between them.
Expensive.
It's expensive.
GAA
Go at present don't do it. Do you think there'll be an expectation on them to do it?
Well, they'll have to. I think they'll have to do something, but I don't know how expansive it will be, or how detailed, or how sort of all-encompassing it will be, or it can be. Just a very quick debrief on the background. I'm doing a course at the minute in sports, right, in the business of sport and sports rights management. Right, it's a distance online course, quite interesting, and there's an entire module on it on OTT platforms, which I'm in the middle of doing right now. So it's kind of unusual that this has all come out. So like this now, these OTT platforms and direct to consumer provision of content by big, massive conglomerates have been around for a while. So this isn't a new area that the GAA are getting into at all. And RTÉ, obviously, by virtue of the fact that they're partnered up on this. And so you have, going back as far as Netflix and right up to modern times with DAZN, and you have 11, and you have all the different streaming services on our smart TVs, whether it's Netflix or Prime, all those types of things. Here's the key thing, though. None make money. Not a single one. There is one company that is just about keeping its head above the parapet, which is Netflix. And the only reason they're looking to try and kind of push on a little bit out of this is because they're bringing in an advertising part to their subscription, whereby you're going to have to pay extra again to avoid the advertising sections that you're going to get from your own particular sub. So your sub, whether you're paying a tenner a month, is going to have to go up to 12 to 14 euros a month if you want it ad free. Now, these are multinational conglomerates, and they're all starting to kind of amalgamate. DAZN have just bought 11, and they're all starting to kind of feed into each other, and they're basically like viruses now, all kind of meshing in, because they realize this thing is so unwieldy and it's so difficult in a financial sense to make it wash its face, that they're all now basically amalgamating into sort of kind of, and that's going to continue to morph over the next coming years. Enter the GAA in a really small market, right? In an era where illegal streaming and illegal devices and dodgy boxes and all of that now is happening all across the board. This will be difficult in a business sense. I presume there are people much more knowledgeable than I am that have crunched the numbers on this, and you would hope for their sake that that's the case, because you have to bear in mind here, what the GA have done here is they've gone from a situation whereby they were picking up a check from Sky for the rights and uploading all of the production issues. They're now in a situation where they're not getting any check because they're effectively signing a contract with themselves, and they're taking on all of the production issues. So in a shrinking inter-county season, your main cash cow is already under retreat. Financially, I would say there are big concerns, but I think, as Paul said, there's a couple of issues that you probably need to leave this teethed out for maybe the first year or two and hope that things settle down into a pattern. The problem will be that in this type of environment where the budgets can run away on you very, very quickly, and you can start hemorrhaging money extremely fast, that there might have to be a very, very quick review if this thing doesn't wash its face long term.
Paul, you've obviously tracked the kind of the broadcasting history of the GA as well as any history of the GA. How do you see this pan out? Because obviously the GA, like most sporting organisations, our closest cousins over the water. Obviously, we're very suspicious of television and the impact it would have on gates, and still are to the point where there's a blackout of 3 p.m. kickoffs on television in Britain. But in Ireland as well, obviously the GA, the matches weren't televised, and very slowly, 1 match a year, 2 matches a year were televised, and like anything though, the drip becomes a flood, and now we have more GA on television than we've ever had. And now, as you mentioned, there's this new technology, streaming, which is very interesting. And I wonder, are we going from kind of the high production, are we going into a new age now where we've gone past kind of, our high production is one side of it, and that's, people like that, they like their pundits, they like their promos, they like their analysis, but then also, if it means they get to see a game, they're quite happy with the GA Go model, as we've seen with the clubs. Like, people, I want to watch that county final, I can't go to it, I'm happy to pay a tenner and get a medium quality stream, biased commentator and no analysis, but that's fine because I'm getting to watch the game. Do you think that actually we could be getting kind of a 2-tier media kind of market here now, where there's your ones with the added on value that Rory produces in RTÉ, and then the streaming one, which is different but still people will value it because it's better than not seeing the game?
So I suppose I'll first of all slightly disagree with you. I watched a lot of club finals and club games that were broadcast around the country over the last couple of years, and I think the commentators were good actually in a lot of places, and I do think there was analysis wrapped around it, sometimes with a co-com but also with a studio. I know, say for example, I know the guys who ran it in Offaly, and they put in some good stuff there. I accept that it's not the high end HD stuff that you would see through RTÉ or Sky, but it was perfectly professional, perfectly acceptable. That's the first point to make. The second point is in relation to what's key to this here. It's the ability to see games.
Yeah,
that's what people who are going to buy these games want to see. They want to see the games here. So, for example, if you look at the NBA, so the NBA have an NBA app which you can buy for about €200 a year pass, more or less €208, I think, for a year's pass. And for that pass, you can see any game played anywhere in the NBA on any night. And
but they're selling their rights. They're selling their rights to cable network as well. Obviously, on top of that, Paul.
Of course they are. Yeah. So they've cable rights, but the point of it is that in a lot of those broadcasts, when the ball isn't in play, and in American sports, the ball isn't in play an awful lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot of breaks. there is just music and a holding card or a camera there just filming the area and nothing on. It just sits there and it's fine. Now, you can either choose to look at that and listen to it, or you can be doing something else between the plays as it's going on. And I without wanting to insult anyone who stands on the sideline and offers analysis, or anybody who does pre or post match, I enjoy that, but what I enjoy most of all is the games. And I think people will willingly accept. And I know, as someone who's from a Division 3 county whose games will not be shown live on television next year unless they reach Tailteann semis and finals, if someone wants to show Offaly v Longford in the National Football League, and I know there's people all over the country getting excited at that prospect, but Offaly v Longford in the National Football League with just 2 cameras or 1 camera showing the stream with a commentator, or even with no commentator, I would gladly watch that because I want to see Offaly play football. And I don't think I'm unique in that.
I think though one point though that I think is worth making, and I'm obviously going to beat the parochial drum. I think it's a brilliant deal for RTÉ. I think it's a really good indictment of what RTÉ can bring to the table and have done for 40, 50 years of broadcasting. There are obvious frustrations over the last number of years in relation to the proliferation of games and how they have been covered, and the straitjacket that some of us have found ourselves in as a result. But I think that straitjacket's been loosened with some of the big positive aspects that have come out of this, in terms of a second highlights show, a possibility, and when that'll happen, obviously that's up for discussion, and that'll come in due course. I think the digital rights, from your point of view, Mikey, is massive, absolutely huge, really big positive, because I know you were pretty hamstrung in terms of the last deal. And I think one aspect that often gets forgotten in all of this is how important radio is. Like the job that RT Radio do, and I don't work in radio, but like I do drive in the car a lot on Saturdays and Sundays, because you would be up and down the country going to matches. The job radio does and bouncing around reporters, commentators at every venue, every ground, it's just incredible. And I think it's a huge boost for them, and a huge indictment of everything that they've been doing well over the last 5 years to get that contract once again. And I think people shouldn't underestimate that. I mean, it's a massive listenership. Think of all the people traveling around their cars at the weekend, especially in the summertime. And I think it's a really good service. And that's often a forgotten part of all of this.
Okay. Well, we need to finish up now, but I don't want the last word to be Rory's self-serving word for.
Yeah, exactly. Please don't.
So, Paul, do you foresee in 5 years' time another broadcaster coming back in, or do you think that the GAA, look into your crystal ball? I know the past is your speciality, but in the future, do you think the GAA will get a handle on this streaming thing, and this could be the start of the GAA, on the road to their kind of that NBA model that you described for us?
I would look at it slightly. I would look at it in a slightly different way if I could. We're at the beginning of a broader social change being driven by the internet and by internet-based technologies and by the web, in terms of human behaviors of all aspects of it, whether that's broadcasting or anything else. Change is happening in every aspect, in every area of life. However, it is still a constant, and it has been a constant since the 1960s in Ireland, since the arrival of television, of big sporting events being central to live television and being important to it. Even if they're working huge numbers at the beginning, there are still key moments that are there. For all that there's been a revolution in streaming, for all that things have changed, for all that people talked about the decline of various things, it is a basic fact that I think the broadcast on free-to-air television of major sports is a proven winner at this stage, and I don't see that changing for the key ones. I think what's going to happen all around, so whether that is RTÉ or whether that is somebody else, can be decided in the next deal, and I would say that that's partly will depend on the quality of the service that RTÉ provide. And I think if I was in RTÉ, I would be confident that I could provide a service that will be of the highest quality, and or at least it should be. It's public service broadcasting, and RTÉ has some brilliant people working for it who should be well able to do that. will those rights be spliced off also with Virgin Media or with some other supplier? Well, of course, there's absolutely a prospect of that. But the big future is going to revolve around what happens in broad-based technologies. And it's very difficult to see how exactly that will be shaped, who will use that technology, how it will be sold, but everything is heading that direction. And to imagine otherwise seems to me to be something that will happen unless a new technological change emerges to undercut that, as telly did to radio. Okay.
Interesting times ahead. Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you, Rory. Just to reiterate, the All Stars will be on television tomorrow night, and they'll also be streamed on the RTÉ player, because we're getting there. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Rory, and we will chat to you all next week. Thank you very much.
Position crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar.